They told me I was lucky. Lucky to be taken in. Lucky to have family left. Lucky to be sent somewhere safe. I smiled politely as the social worker said it again, her knuckles white on the steering wheel as we curved up the long drive toward the house on Vale Hill Road. I didn't bother correcting her. People don't like it when you tell them you know better. The house appeared like something from a forgotten painting. 3 stories tall, covered in ivy, its windows like narrowed eyes watching your every step. The trees were too close, and the silence too thick. Even the birds didn't sing here. "They're very private," she said, glancing at me, "but they asked for you by name." That was the first lie. The second was the idea that this was a home. As we pulled up, the front door opened before the engine even stopped. Out stepped a woman in a navy dress that looked pressed into her skin. Her lips were thin, her spine straighter than any branch in the forest behind her. "Aunt Isabel," the social worker said brightly. The woman didn't smile. "Ms. Vale." Her voice was smooth, measured, final. I stepped out with my backpack. That was all I had left. Everything else had been boxed, sold, or simply discarded after the fire, after the foster homes, after the silence. I extended a hand. "Thank you for taking me in." She looked at it for a moment, then turned on her heel. "You'll follow me. No shoes past the threshold." I exchanged a look with the social worker. She gave me a tight-lipped nod that said, "This is your chance." So I followed. The house was colder inside than out. All stone and wood, no warmth. The hallway stretched long, lined with black and white photos of people who looked like they'd been born scowling. "This is not a holiday," Aunt Isabel said as we walked. "You will follow house routines. Meals are taken together, no locked doors, no visitors." "Understood," I said quietly. "I trust you know how to keep your head down." I said nothing. She took that as agreement. She stopped at a narrow door at the end of the hall. This was Charlotte's room. Charlotte. She didn't explain who Charlotte was. She didn't have to. The room was immaculate. Not just clean, untouched. The kind of untouched that feels intentional, like something had been removed, scrubbed out. "You'll be up at 6, Isabel said. "Breakfast is at 6:30. After that, you'll assist with household tasks. You'll stay out of the north wing." "Why?" She turned to face me, her eyes flat. "Because I said so." Then she left. I sat on the bed, letting the silence settle around me. The air smelled like lavender and old paper. A desk stood beneath the window, empty. A wardrobe with mirrored doors reflected the entire room, but somehow made it feel smaller. I waited until the house quieted. Then I began to look. Not because I was nosy, because I've learned one thing in every home I've ever entered. If they're hiding something, it's about you. Under the bed, nothing. Behind the dresser, dust. But in the desk drawer, beneath a false bottom, I found a single object, a locket. Inside, 2 photos. One of a girl, maybe 16, blonde, serious eyes. The other, a slip of paper, folded and fragile. Don't trust the woman in blue. A chill went through me. I closed the locket carefully. There were no photos of Charlotte in the hallway, no trace of her in the rest of the house. But someone had made sure this was left behind. On purpose. For someone like me. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy, weighted with something unsaid. And I realized I wasn't sent here because I was lucky. I was sent here because someone thought I wouldn't ask questions. But I've made a life out of asking the questions no one wants to hear. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a bell. Not an alarm, a handbell. Sharp and insistent, like something from a convent or an asylum. It rang 3 times and then silence. I sat up, disoriented but alert. The house was still dim. No light yet crept through the narrow window. I dressed quickly, laced my boots, and stepped into the hall. Aunt Isabel was already waiting at the bottom of the stairs, standing like a statue. Her dark dress looked the same as the day before, and her hands were clasped behind her back. "You're late," she said, without checking a clock. I didn't know the bell was, "Now you do." In the dining room, breakfast was laid out with mathematical precision. 2 boiled eggs, 1 slice of toast, a cup of tea. I sat where she pointed and waited for her to begin eating. She didn't. She just watched me. After a long pause, she spoke. "You may refer to me as Aunt Isabel, or simply Isabel, whichever you prefer." I nodded. "Okay. I assume you are capable of basic household responsibilities?" "Yes. You'll begin with the upstairs library, dusting, then polishing the glass. After that, you will assist Mrs. Renly in the greenhouse." "Who's Mrs. Renly?" "Our housekeeper. She'll give you further instructions. You will speak to her only when necessary. And if you ever hear her humming, leave the room." That made me blink. "Excuse me?" Isabel looked directly at me. If she's humming, leave the room. The silence stretched. I took a sip of tea. It was lukewarm and bitter. "May I ask about Charlotte?" I said softly. She didn't flinch, but her fingers curled slightly around her teacup. "There is no Charlotte in this house," she said flatly. "But this was her room, wasn't it?" "Charlotte is not your concern." "She lived here before me, right?" "I said," Isabel said, her voice sharp now, "she is not your concern." I held her gaze for a second too long. She noticed. I smiled slightly and took another bite of toast. The upstairs library was beautiful. Dusty, yes, but beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, all dark wood and fading leather, a velvet armchair by the window, a ladder that rolled smoothly along the rails. I ran my fingers along the spines, all arranged alphabetically, all untouched for years, maybe decades. On the far side of the room, a cabinet stood apart, glass-fronted, locked. Inside were books with no titles on the spines, just dates, handwritten. I tried the handle, locked. Of course, but as I turned to go, I noticed something strange. The rug beneath the cabinet was uneven, pulled slightly like it had been shifted. I bent down and lifted the corner. There, beneath it, a trap door. The old-fashioned kind, with iron hinges and a heavy brass ring. My fingers hovered over it. But before I could pull, I heard it. A hum, software mournful. Low. Coming from the hallway. I backed away from the trap door and slowly approached the doorway. Just outside, moving slowly down the corridor, was a woman in a green apron, hair pinned back, a large basket in her arms. She was humming. Something old. Something sad. Mrs. Renly. She didn't look at me. She just kept walking. The moment she passed, the humming stopped, as if a switch had been flipped. And then she was gone. In the greenhouse, Mrs. Renly was silent. She pointed to a set of gloves and then to the soil beds. I began weeding without complaint. The glass panes were fogged from the inside. The air was thick with damp moss and orchids. Everything in the greenhouse seemed to be growing too well, wild, overfull, like nature was trying to claw its way out. I found it strangely comforting. As I worked, I glanced up at Mrs. Renly. She was pruning vines with tiny scissors, her hands impossibly steady. "Do you know what happened to Charlotte?" I asked quietly. She paused, then clipped a leaf. "She left," she said. "That's all?" "She was told not to ask questions." "Did she?" A longer pause. "She did." "And then?" Mrs. Renly turned toward me, her expression unreadable. "She stopped." That night I couldn't sleep. I turned the locket over and over in my hand. The message was still there. Don't trust the woman in blue. Isabel always wore dark blue. I opened the drawer again, searching for anything I'd missed. And then I saw it, scratched faintly into the wood at the back of the drawer. It wasn't an accident, just 5 words, but they felt like a scream. And I knew. Whatever happened to Charlotte, someone wanted me to know. I couldn't stop thinking about the message carved into the drawer. It wasn't an accident. What wasn't? Charlotte's disappearance? Something worse? The house creaked constantly now, like it knew I had read too much. Every whisper of wind against the windows felt deliberate. Every silence stretched a second too long. I waited until after midnight to go back to the library. The hall was dark. The old grandfather clock had long since struck 12. The house had fallen into that eerie stillness, unique to places that are too big for the people inside them. I stepped quietly through the doorway and crossed the room to the glass cabinet, still locked, but this time I came prepared. From the sewing drawer in the kitchen, I had taken a thin hairpin. I'd learned to pick small locks long before I'd learned to trust people. It took less than a minute. The cabinet opened with a soft click. Inside were 10 books. Each had a year written on the spine in gold ink. 2009, 2010, 2011, through to 2018. I chose the one marked 2015, the year carved into the underside of the locket. I flipped it open. Handwriting filled every page. Small, cramped, urgent. It wasn't Isabel's, and it wasn't neat enough to be a housekeeper's ledger. It was a journal. March 12th, I think she hears me at night. I tried to stop the humming, but it's worse now. She keeps looking at me like she knows. I wish I had stayed quiet. March 20th. Mrs. Renly told me to stop talking to the girl from the gate. She said, "They'll send you away too." I don't know what that means. Who are they? April 1st, I asked about the locked room. I got slapped. I didn't even know she could do that. April 8th. Something's wrong. There's blood on the north stairs and no one is talking about it. I'm not imagining it. I know I'm not. I flipped forward, my hands shaking. The last entry was dated April 17th. If anyone finds this, I didn't fall. I didn't run away. I didn't imagine it. It was real. Everything. And if she says I left, she's lying. No signature. No goodbye. Just that. I closed the book slowly. Charlotte hadn't run. She had been silenced. And everything pointed back to Isabel and the forbidden north wing. The next morning, I found myself scrubbing the entry tiles with a wire brush, while Isabel watched from a distance, sipping tea like I was just another chore to manage. Her dress was dark blue again. Same shade as every other day. "Would you like me to dust the north wing next?" I asked, not looking up. The silence was sharp. Then, "That wing is closed." "Because of Charlotte?" She took a step closer. Her heels clicked like clock hands. "There is no Charlotte in this house." "But her journals are. So is her room." "There are things you do not understand." "Then explain them." Another step. "You are here because I offered you a roof, Ms. Vale. That offer is not permanent. Don't confuse charity for interest." She turned on her heel and walked away. But her hand trembled just slightly as she placed her teacup down. That night, I returned to the library with a flashlight. The trap door beneath the rug hadn't moved. I pulled it open. Below, a short wooden ladder descending into darkness. The air smelled like stone and dust and time. I climbed down. It wasn't a basement. It was a tunnel. Narrow, with stone walls on either side. The floor was dirt, but dry. At the end, a door, small, iron, arched. I tried the handle. It opened. The room was windowless, lit only by moonlight filtering through slats in the ceiling. Boxes stacked against the wall, a rotting armchair, shelves of notebooks and papers, and a painting, covered in a white sheet. I pulled it off. It was a portrait. Charlotte. Same eyes, same sharp mouth, but her throat had been painted out, just black brushstrokes smeared where her skin should have been, and carved into the frame, barely visible. They took her voice. I will take theirs. I backed away slowly. Then I heard it again. That soft, haunting hum. Only this time, it wasn't in the hallway. It was in the room with me. I froze. The humming was faint, but close. Too close. Not coming from the hallway, not above me, behind me. I turned slowly, flashlight raised. There was no one in sight. Only the empty chair, the shelves of old papers, and the painting with its brutal black streaks across Charlotte's throat. The humming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I backed out of the room carefully, keeping my eyes forward, not daring to blink too long. Something about that space felt off, like it was too aware of my presence, like the walls had been waiting to hear footsteps again. When I reached the trap door, I climbed back into the library and shut it with both hands. My breath came in short gasps. my heart hammering like it was trying to get out. I pulled the rug back over the hatch and stepped away. The house was still. Too still. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the edges of the locket. I opened it again and stared at the message. Don't trust the woman in blue. It wasn't paranoia. It was a warning. Whoever had left that locket knew what I was stepping into, knew who Isabel really was, knew what this house was hiding. And now I knew something else. Charlotte hadn't vanished. She'd been erased, just like that painted throat. The next day, the air in the house had shifted. Isabel was nowhere to be seen. Mrs. Renly didn't hum. And every door I passed was cracked open just enough to suggest a presence, but never fully reveal one. I took my cleaning assignment and ignored it. Instead, I walked the full perimeter of the house, mentally mapping every locked room, every staircase, every window. And finally, I reached the north wing, the forbidden place. The doorknob was cold, heavy. It didn't turn. Locked. Of course. I leaned in and listened. Nothing. Then, I spotted it. Above the doorframe, a key. Just barely visible, tucked into a ledge in the molding. The kind of place only someone tall, or trained, would know to look. I grabbed a chair and climbed up, took the key, turned it in the lock. The door opened with a long, aching groan. Inside, the air was different. Drier. Still. Like a museum closed to the public. The hallway stretched longer than expected, lined with doors, faded wallpaper, dust in perfect rows. The first room was empty. Just a single chair in the middle, facing a window that looked out into a brick wall. No bed, no shelves, just the chair. The second room had a mirror, but the glass was shattered. Spiderweb cracks reached from the center like veins. On the floor, a doll with no face. The third room, that was Charlotte's. I knew it immediately. It was identical to mine, but colder, not physically, emotionally. Like whatever life had once been here had been sucked out and locked away. On the desk, a journal. I opened it. The same handwriting, the same careful, desperate style. But these entries were different. Shorter, harsher. June 1st. She watches me, even when she's not in the room. June 3rd, I saw the painting. She told me to forget it. June 7th. I'm not safe here. June 9th, I heard her humming. But it wasn't Renly. It was her. June 10th. If she ever smiles at you, run. I closed the journal and looked around the room again. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. The floorboards beneath the bed had been disturbed, scratched at, like someone had tried to claw their way out or leave a sign behind. I got down on my knees and ran my fingers along the edge, a loose board. I pried it up. Inside, another locket and a photograph. Charlotte again, this time smiling, standing in front of the greenhouse. And beside her, a girl, same age, same eyes. Not me, not Charlotte, someone else. On the back of the photo, she said I was next. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the library with the red book on my lap, every candle in the room lit. The shadows still crept in, still curled at the edges, but I didn't flinch anymore. I was done being quiet. Whatever had happened to Charlotte, whatever Isabel had done, it wasn't finished. It was still happening. And this time, the girl in the house knew how to fight back. I waited for her to smile, not because I wanted it, but because I needed to see it. To be sure, the journal said, if she ever smiles at you, run. And I had never seen Isabel smile until that morning. I was in the kitchen when she walked in, wearing a dress the color of night, her posture rigid, her fingers perfectly still. She asked me how I slept. I lied. She offered me tea. I declined. Then, without warning, she smiled. It was too slow, too wide, the kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. It stayed a second too long, like it was stitched on. And in that moment, I knew. Charlotte had been right. Later that day, I went back to the tunnel beneath the library. This time, I brought a knife. A small one tucked into the sleeve of my jacket. I wasn't planning on using it. I just needed to feel like something sharp was still mine. The iron door creaked as I pushed it open again. The portrait was still there. Charlotte, beautiful and silent. And something new. A single white flower placed at the base of the frame. Fresh. Someone had been here. I moved to the shelves and began searching through the notebooks. Most were Charlotte's. Pages filled with questions, symbols, drawings of doorways and keys. But one book stood out. It was bound in black leather, newer, thicker. Inside, names, dates, and a pattern. Girls, all around the same age. All placed with relatives, all vanished within 6 months. And in the margin, written in red ink, voice taken, voice taken, voice taken. The book ended with a final entry. Just one sentence. Sirenvale arrives next week. Prepare the room. My breath caught. My hands trembled. They hadn't taken me in out of kindness. I wasn't the first. I was part of something. A system, a cycle, a ritual. And now, I was supposed to be next. That night, I waited in the hallway until Isabel turned in for bed. She always retired precisely at 9 o'clock. The hall clock struck, the lights dimmed, and the house began to whisper to itself again. I moved quietly down the north wing. I had memorized the creaks in the floorboards, the places where the shadows held secrets. I slipped into Charlotte's room, my room, and lifted the floorboard again. This time, I left something there. A letter, not for me, not for Isabel, but for whoever came after, because I knew there would be another. Unless I stopped it. I returned to the greenhouse the next morning. Mrs. Renly was waiting. She didn't look up as I entered. "I know," I said softly. She stopped pruning. Her shoulders stiffened. "I know about the book, the tunnel, the others." Silence. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Still, no answer. "Why didn't you say anything?" She turned slowly. Her eyes met mine, tired, ancient, heavy. "I did," she whispered. "You just didn't know how to listen." Then she handed me something, a folded piece of paper. I opened it. A list of names, the same ones from the black book, but with one difference. Next to each, the word chose, except for mine. Next to mine, refused. I looked up, confused. "You weren't supposed to come here," she said. "You were supposed to disappear like the others." "Why didn't I?" She stared at me for a long moment, then finally said, "Because you still know how to scream." That night, I made my plan. Not for revenge, not really. It was something quieter, sharper, like the tip of a needle slipped beneath the skin. I waited until the house was asleep. Then I lit a fire. Not in the hearth, but in the tunnel. Paper, journals, Charlotte's portrait, everything they'd hidden, everything they tried to erase. I fed it to the flames. Smoke filled the secret room, but not the house. I'd sealed the trapdoor tight. Let them smell it. Let them wonder. But when they opened it, there would be nothing left to hide behind. By morning, the library floor was still warm beneath the rug. Isabel looked up from her tea as I entered the dining room. She smiled again. This time, I smiled back. "I'm leaving," I said. "You'll regret that." "Number, you will." She tilted her head slightly. "You think you've won something?" I pulled a flash drive from my coat pocket and set it on the table. "It's already been sent." "To who?" "Everyone who needs to see it." Her smile faltered, and for the first time since I'd arrived at Valahill, Isabel blinked first. I didn't pack much, just my locket, the photo of Charlotte, and the letter I'd written to the next girl, sealed in a glass jar, tucked back under the floorboard where someone would eventually find it. If the house survived, if Isabel stayed, if the silence didn't collapse in on itself first, the flash drive I left on the table wasn't the only copy. The files, photos, scanned pages from Charlotte's journal, lists, voice memos had already been uploaded and scheduled. At exactly 8 a.m., the entire folder would drop into the inboxes of every social worker, local journalist, school counselor, and private investigator connected to this place. I titled it The Valley Hill Pattern, a Record of the Lost. I stood outside the estate gate as the sky began to glow with the first breath of morning. The house behind me loomed large and gray, its windows dark like shut eyes. It didn't burn, but I had burned it from the inside, and fire doesn't need flames to leave scars. I walked into the village alone. The same driver who had brought me here with the social worker now drove the bus that ran through town once a day. He didn't recognize me. That was fine. I didn't want to be remembered the way I arrived. I wanted to be remembered for how I left. By noon, the emails had landed. The journalist I'd chosen replied within 20 minutes. Her name was Lena Doyle. I'd researched her long before I made my move. Her inbox had been flooded with half-truths and anonymous tips over the years, but none with documentation this detailed. Her message was short. I believe you. Where can we meet? I didn't answer right away, not because I was afraid, but because I needed a moment to let it be real. I wasn't being hunted anymore. I was being heard. Back at the house, Isabel must have realized it by now. She'd go to the trapdoor, find ashes, she'd search my room, find it clean. She'd question Mrs. Renly, who would say nothing, just like she always had, because Isabel had ruled this place with silence. But she'd forgotten one thing. Silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of control. And I had taken that away. It took 2 weeks for the fallout to begin. The article dropped like thunder. The Lost Girls of Vale Hill, how a family estate became a chamber of silence. Names were named, photos were printed, the Black Journal's contents were shared, dates, statements, patterns. Social workers began reopening closed files. One mother came forward, then another. They hadn't forgotten their daughters. They'd just been told no one would believe them. Now they had proof, and proof is louder than grief. Isabel didn't speak publicly, not once, but when the police came, she didn't resist. She went quietly, the same way she'd made them all disappear. But she forgot. The quiet ones remember everything. I never returned to Valley Hill, but I heard what happened after. The house was seized, investigated, cataloged. 2 more journals were found, Charlotte's early ones hidden beneath a floor tile in the conservatory, and behind a false panel in the greenhouse, a photo board with dozens of Polaroids. Every girl who had ever stayed there. Charlotte had tried to mark them. She just hadn't lived long enough to make them seen. Now they were. All of them. Months passed. I got my own place. A small studio apartment with a leaky window and too much light. I painted one wall red, not because I liked the color, but because I needed something bold to look at every morning. Something loud. I started writing under a pseudonym, an op-ed in The Guardian, a thread on Reddit, a short story that wasn't a story at all. People called it haunting. They didn't know it was true. I got a letter one day. No return address, no name. Inside, a photo. A girl, maybe 16, standing at a train station holding a small suitcase. On the back, written in unfamiliar handwriting, I found your letter. I didn't go inside. Thank you, I held the photo for a long time. Then I pinned it to the red wall, right at the center. They say revenge is loud, explosive, a final act. But sometimes, revenge is quiet. A sealed letter. A deleted name. A girl who walks away with her voice intact. My name is Saren Vale. I was supposed to vanish. Instead, I became the echo they couldn't erase.